Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Turkey says it is seeking a new mission in Afghanistan with Pakistan and Hungary's involvement after the US-led forces leave. President Tayyip Erdogan proposed this while talking to reporters after the NATO summit in Brussels. Erdogan said Ankara will need Washington's diplomatic, logistic and financial support if it is to maintain troops in Afghanistan. Beijing has urged the NATO to stop exaggerating the China threat theory. In a statement, China's mission to the European Union said the alliance is misjudging the international situation. It said NATO is slandering China's peaceful development, which indicates a Cold War mentality. This comes after the group's leaders warned that China presents systemic challenges. In Japan, the lower house of parliament has blocked a new confidence vote against Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. The opposition submitted the motion after the ruling coalition rejected their demand to extend the parliamentary session. Deaths from COVID-19 in the US have crossed 600,000 with nearly 33.5 million infections. Pakistan has reported less than 1,000 cases after almost a month with 59 fatalities overnight. Globally, the new coronavirus has claimed 3.8 million lives and infected more than 176 million people. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail is coming after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Turkey says it is seeking a new mission in Afghanistan with Pakistan and Hungary's involvement after the US-led forces leave. President Tayyip Erdogan proposed this while talking to reporters after the NATO summit in Brussels. Erdogan said Ankara will need Washington's diplomatic, logistic and financial support if it is to maintain troops in Afghanistan. Turkey currently has some 500 soldiers in the country. The Turkish president termed his first face-to-face meeting with the US President Joe Biden constructive. Erdogan said there are no unsolvable problems between the two countries despite no progress on the S-400 issue. Meanwhile, the US president also dubbed talks with his Turkish counterpart as productive.
I just finished meeting with President Erdogan of Turkey. We had a positive and productive meeting, much of it one-on-one. We had detailed discussions about how to proceed on a number of issues. Our two countries have big agendas. Our teams are going to continue our discussions, and I'm confident we'll make real progress with Turkey and the United States.
Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, unidentified gunmen have killed 5 polio workers in 5 separate attacks in Nangarhar province. A provincial governor spokesperson says 4 other workers have been injured in the province. He said the attacks were carried out in the Sork Road and Kogyani districts and the city of Jalalabad. The spokesperson said special security arrangements were not made for the workers despite requests. Polio immunization drive head Dr. John Mohammed said today was the second day of operation after 3 months. Mohammed regretted that they have to suspend the vaccine drive once again. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attacks. Now, Beijing has urged NATO to stop exaggerating the China threat theory. In a statement, China's mission to the European Union said the alliance is misjudging the international situation. It said NATO is slandering China's peaceful development, which indicates a Cold War mentality. Beijing warned that it will not remain indifferent in the face of a systemic challenge. This comes after the group's leader warned that China poses a threat to security of the alliance. Speaking after a summit in Brussels, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance sought to counter China. Now, the U.S. Navy says an aircraft carrier group led by the USS Ronald Reagan has entered the South China Sea. China frequently objects to U.S. military missions in the region, saying they do not help promote peace or stability. The Navy said the routine mission includes guided missile cruiser USS Shello and destroyer USS Helsley. It said the strike group is conducting maritime security operations in the sea. These include flight operations, maritime strike exercises and coordinated tactical training between surface and air units. This coincides with rising tensions between Washington and Beijing, escalated by the G7 and NATO summits. Moscow says it is ready to reciprocate if Washington returns Russian prisoners held in the U.S. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov made these remarks ahead of a meeting between the two presidents in Geneva. In an interview, Ryabkov said the summit may result in the return of expelled ambassadors of Russia and the U.S. He added this would be an important signal that a difficult page is turning and something new is beginning. But the minister noted it would be naive to expect large-scale and far-reaching breakthroughs. He also said Moscow has passed on its proposals for strategic stability to Washington. On arms control, Ryabkov said the process should acquire a multilateral character. Moving on now, in Japan, the lower house of parliament has blocked a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga's cabinet. The opposition submitted the motion after the ruling coalition rejected their demand to extend the current parliamentary session. Constitutional Democratic Party chief said the Suga government has not been able to protect the lives and livelihoods. Suga previously suggested he would dissolve the lower house for a snap election should such a motion be submitted. The no-confidence motion was the first since June 2019, when it was filed against Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet. Also, Japan has condemned South Korea's military drills around a set of disputed islands, demanding immediate cancellation. Tokyo and Seoul have been at odds over the sovereignty of the islets in the Sea of Japan. Chief Cabinet Secretary Katsunobu Kato called the islands Japan's territory under international law. At a news conference, Kato termed the training exercises unacceptable and extremely regrettable. He also denied reports that South Korean President Moon Jae-in is arranging a visit to Japan timed with the Tokyo Olympics. Meanwhile, Seoul's defense ministry says naval, air and coast guard forces are joining the drills being staged mostly on the sea. The drills around the islands have taken place twice a year since 1986, promoting frequent protests from Japan. Moving on, Palestinian factions have called for a day of rage as far-right Israeli groups prepare to march in East Jerusalem. Hamas has warned Israel of renewed hostilities if the procession goes ahead. Palestine's Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh has called for stopping the march. He said it is a provocation against Palestinians in Jerusalem. Shtayyeh also warned the occupying forces of dangerous repercussions over the flag march. Moreover, Israel's defense forces will stand by in case of a surge in violence during the procession. It risks reigniting tensions in Gaza and rekindling violence between Israel and Hamas. Now, deaths from COVID-19 in the U.S. have crossed 600,000 with nearly 33.5 million cases. Globally, the new coronavirus has claimed 3.8 million lives and infected more than 176 million people. More about the pandemic in this report.
Although COVID-19 vaccination graphs around the world bring hopes of normalcy, the number of cases shows little signs of retreating. Chile says it will extend a COVID-19 emergency through September to allow the government to impose restrictions. Cases have soared in the country to some of their highest levels since the pandemic began, despite 61% of citizens receiving at least one vaccine dose and 48% being fully vaccinated. Brazil has extended the validity of the single-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine, prolonging its shelf life from 3 months to 4.5. Meanwhile, as the U.S. emerges from lockdowns, the grim milestone of 600,000 deaths is a painful reminder.
It's just very sad, and it's very hard to know that I'm coming on a year. But I do feel that he made such a strong impact on all of our lives that he's still with us.
Over in Europe, hundreds of protesters gathered around London's Parliament Square against the delay in further easing of restrictions. British Health Minister Matt Hancock says the government took the decision with a heavy heart, following concerns about a rapid rise in Delta variant infections, first discovered in India.
The Delta variant now accounts for over 90% of cases across the country. We know the Delta variant spreads more easily, and there's evidence that the risk of hospitalisation is higher than for the previously dominant Alpha variant. Mr. Speaker, case numbers are rising, up 64% on last week in England.
India has reported more than 2,700 deaths and over 60,000 new infections in the past 24 hours, the lowest cases since March 31st. Meanwhile, Japan will send 1 million COVID-19 vaccine doses to Vietnam. Tokyo says it also plans to send doses to Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines and Thailand next month.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 59 deaths from coronavirus in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the tally of fatalities is approaching 21,800. Less than 8,000 people tested positive for the virus overnight, the lowest in the third wave of the pandemic. It has taken the positivity rate to 2.39%. Pakistan has reported more than 942,000 cases since the pandemic began, with over 878,000 recoveries. There are nearly 41,000 active cases in the country and 2,600 are critical. According to the ministry, over 11 million vaccines have been administered in the country to date. Pakistan says it is keen to expand military cooperation with Egypt. Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee General Nadeem Raza made these remarks in a meeting with the Egyptian president in Cairo. For his part, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said his country values brotherly relations with Pakistan. El-Sisi lauded the professionalism of Pakistan's army and acknowledged their sacrifices in the fight against terrorism. General Raza also held a meeting with the Egyptian Defense Minister, Army Chief and Chiefs of the Tri-Services. Moreover, the chief led the second round of defense and security talks there. He highlighted Pakistan's role in countering terrorism and in regional stability and connectivity. Moving on now, the UN says it is preparing for a likely displacement of more Afghan civilians following the withdrawal of US and allied forces. In an interview, UN Refugee Chief Filippo Grandi said violence has been resurfacing in Afghanistan. Grandi warned the situation is likely to become worse with the withdrawal of international troops. He noted strong international support is needed for peace talks between Kabul and the Taliban. Meanwhile, UN aid chief Mark Lowcock said international focus on Afghanistan has weakened lately. He said he had productive discussions with the Biden administration on maximizing aid. The UN appealed for $1.3 billion in funding for 2021 and has only received about 23% of that. According to the UN, some 18.4 million people in Afghanistan need humanitarian assistance. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. In Myanmar, demonstrators are staging a sit-in against the military regime in the Mayang township of Magwe region. Many marched in Mandalay City, Sagaing and Taninthari region, calling for a boycott of military-linked products. In Kachin State's Pakant, people took to the streets vowing to root out the military regime. The dissent continues even though the military has killed 863 civilians and arrested over 6,000 since the coup. This comes a day after ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi went on trial for 3 cases in Naypyidaw. They were linked to the illegal possession of walkie-talkie radios and breaching coronavirus regulations. Now, the European Union Court of Justice has allowed the national watchdogs of member states to act against data violations. The court said the supervisory bodies are allowed to act even if they are not the lead regulators for the firms. European Union's top court got involved after a Belgian court sought guidance. Facebook had challenged against the territorial competence of a Belgian data watchdog. The watchdog attempted to stop the company from tracking users in Belgium through cookies stored in plugins. The ruling could encourage national agencies to act against tech firms that all have their EU headquarters in Ireland. Many national watchdogs in the bloc complain about their Irish counterparts, saying it takes too long to decide on the cases. Now, the outgoing UN chief has slammed the G7 for failing to come up with a plan to vaccinate the world against COVID-19. In an interview, Mark Lowcock said the group's pledge to provide 1 billion doses over the next year is a small step. Lowcock said the supply will vaccinate about 10% of the population of low and middle income countries. He said such sporadic and small-scale handouts from rich countries to poor countries are not a serious plan. He added the group of wealthy nations essentially completely failed to show the necessary urgency to end the pandemic. He said the G7 could also have done a lot more to provide vital supplies such as oxygen ventilators. Now, the U.S. Southwest is racing for a brutal heat wave expected to move into California this week. The hot spell is already punishing some parts of the territory. The Mets say a high-pressure ridge is responsible for the unusually blistering heat this early in the year. The National Weather Service has issued an excessive heat warning for southwest Arizona, including Phoenix. It has predicted dangerously hot conditions and warned of health and fire dangers. Meanwhile, California's temperature is likely to spike over 100 degrees Fahrenheit for several days. Wildfires scorched more than 17,000 square kilometers of land in California in 2020. In business stories, most European stocks have risen as investors await a U.S. Federal Reserve meeting to decide the monetary policy. Frankfurt's DAX is leading the gains by adding over 0.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris has also risen 0.5%. London FTSE and the Pan-European Stock 600 have also edged up fractionally. However, Italy's FTSE MIB has dipped marginally. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed, with the mainland Chinese shares and Hong Kong's Hang Seng declining. And with that, we come to the end of this news bulletin. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.